Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here. Hope you're having a great day. Hope this video make it a little bit better. Today we're going to be doing our updated Constellation tier list. So this is going to be all the champions that are above 3 stars. And we're going to be ranking all champions at 6 stars with their best builds available to them. I just think that is the most fair way to do it. As far as some changes from this tier list over the last one, we're not doing the balanced approach. Last time we tried to make sure there's like the same number of champions in every single tier, and we're just trying to rank them compared to just each other, not really like a set amount of power. Here though, we polled chat and most people did not like that approach, and so we're going for the approach of just ranking champions based on how we kind of feel the power of the tier lists are. So because of that, some of the tiers, especially the A and B tier, were very heavily stacked, so we're adjusting the tier list to be S tier, A plus, A, B plus, B, and then C tier. Nothing below that because we didn't think anyone deserved the D or F tier. Also in this tier list, while we will be giving you some information on the champions, generally we're not going to be diving super deep. We want to make this really nice and fast for you. However, we did a super long stream with chat ranking all of the champions, and we even had some polling and voting for setting up where people wanted champions to go. So if you want to see that, I'll put a link to that in the description down below. If you want a deeper dive, I highly recommend watching it. Also, as far as the rankings, while tier lists are always subjective, this isn't just my personal opinion, as I did always ask chat, and when things were pretty conflicted, I'd put up a poll so people could vote. And so there's actually some champion placements that I wouldn't necessarily 100% agree with myself. In general though, most of the champions are all pretty close in power. And since all the champions are very powerful, this time we're not necessarily focusing on their power. As you can see right here, we're focusing on their speed and then their general weaknesses, because I think the weaknesses champions have is actually probably more impactful than often their power, because almost every champion in the game can absolutely destroy. So for this tier list, I went and took all the champions into a 5 or 6 star nightmare. The weekly nightmares, that is, because those are normally the toughest content in the game, especially when they're pulling out like giant units turn 1, and it generally giving you a larger challenge. Also, I would just do the first couple battles because I didn't want to get too much power through the adventure, just really relying on the champion's basic power. And then at the start of the adventure, when you get to choose a power, I would always choose a power that was not really that synergistic, because I didn't want that to be skewing the results either. So with all that preamble out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in here. So up first, we have Aatrox. Obviously, we're going to go through this in alphabetical order. Also, one last note for the tier list, where the champion is ranked in the tier is actually correspondent to their power. So we're trying to people at the front be more powerful, people at the end be less power generally. But as far as speed, he's normally ending turn 3 or turn 5. This is going to be something pretty consistent that most champions are ending turn 3. And that's because with the deadly modifier, turn 3 is your second attack, which is where most champions are able to end. So he is a little bit on the slower side, sometimes getting pushed back to turn 5. And of course, with this, it's all just generality. Sometimes you can have a better or worse run. And again, this is also just talking about more the start of the adventure where you don't really have any powers. Every single champion can get really crazy and end turn 1, but we're not trying to factor that in. As far as weaknesses, he can be a little bit more inconsistent. Also, your units are pretty weak in that they get a lot of stats once they're equipped, but you have to drop the unit and then the next turn equip them. That gives the enemy a big opportunity to try to kill them. Also, you are a little bit on the slower side, and with your inconsistency, it's your mana cost reduction that can easily just hit unimportant cards. And so Aatrox, a little bit on the weaker side for some champions, so he's actually going to go down in the B tier. Moving on, then we have Ahri. Ahri is super crazy. For her speed, she's normally able to end in 1 to 3 turns, because she can actually put out a lot of damage even when she doesn't attack. So if you don't end turn 1, you can often end turn 3, and then kind of the slowest is turn 3. As far as weaknesses, pretty much it's just not drawing enough Ahris or recalls. Normally going to run Echoing on her, so you're always going to draw Ahri, but you really want a bunch of her champion spells so you can just keep recalling her and nuking the Nexus. So for her, she's going right up there in the S tier. We think she is arguably just the best champion in the game. It's kind of ridiculous how strong she is. Next up, we have Ashan, one of the newest champions in the game. We think he is very consistently able to end turn 3. Again, throughout the course of the adventure, you can often easily end turn 1, but this is just kind of start adventure baseline where he's landing. Turn 3, you get him to be counting down the second landmark and all that cost reduction, and you just go absolutely crazy. As far as weaknesses, anyone that can increase your cost can really shut you down. And then anyone that just has massive units turn 1, and when I say massive, I mean like 20 units turn 1. Ashan can scale up and kill most things, but if they're like 15 to 20, that can really shut you down because then he's not able to attack. For him, we think he is near the bottom of the S tier, really solid, but not able to contend with the best of the best. Next up, we have Ambessa, very fun. For her, she's able to end between turn 3 and turn 5. With her, she can get a lot of rallies, so even in your off turn, she can still normally put out a little bit of damage, but she can be having a little bit of a weak early game, which is what we focus on, is weak turn 1, you need to develop your board, and you don't really have a lot of power turn 1. Also, you are incredibly unit focused. Pretty much everything you do is relying on your units. So if the enemy is really able to shut down your units, then you're really going to struggle. For Ambessa, we're putting her up in the A+ tier. We think she is very good. Next up, we have Ashe. For her, she generally ends between turn 3 to 5. Now, you can still end on that like turn 4, because with her, she does a ton of Nexus damage if you go for the Gatebreaker build. As far as weaknesses, the enemy not having units, or especially not having any big units, can really struggle, since you want the enemy to have bigger units for you to steal all their power. And then also just not drawing Ashe, especially not drawing her at the start of the game. Very similar to like Vi, you need Ashe to be in your opening hand. But for Ashe, we are putting her in the B+ tier. So very solid, but there's just a good amount of champions that are above her, but very middle of B+, very middle of the road. Next up, we have Aurelion Sol. He is obviously very crazy. He was made to be, especially when he was made, the most broken champion in the game. He can normally end between turn 1 and 3. As far as weaknesses, you just can have a little bit of inconsistency of not drawing the right cards. And granted, that's just natural for any card game. And his inconsistency is kind of just determining when you're going to win. Like, you're definitely going to win with Aurelion Sol, but that's just making the biggest difference of if you're going to end turn 1 or if it's going to be more like turn 3. Aurelion Sol, we're putting him up near the top of S tier. He is super good. We all obviously know that. Next up, we have Caitlyn. She can normally end turn 2 or 3. She has enough damage, especially with her skill that she generates with her 6-star, so she can actually end even in her off attack turns. And then her biggest weakness is just bomb inconsistency. Sometimes you're not able to draw them. Now, with her 6-star in the best build, that inconsistency is greatly reduced, but it is still there. For Caitlyn, we're putting her in the B+ tier right there with Ashe. Next up, we have Darius. For his speed, it actually is pretty rough, being that turn 3 to 5. Now, he can be one that can get really, really crazy. He has a very good skill set for ending very quickly, but against some of these bigger adventures, you really can struggle because the enemy is just able to shut you down. So his biggest weaknesses, really can struggle with board space. With your 6-star, you can attack and then not have space to actually generate the unit. You really struggle with a lot of draw. And then you are heavily unit focused, where the enemy, if they can just shut down your units, they completely just ruin your game plan. So for Darius, unfortunately, he's actually going down in the B tier. Next up, we have Ekko. Very strong, very combo-based champion. For his speed, pretty consistently turn 3, you're able to get a massive combo online, normally with a lot of like your parallel convergences, and pretty consistently end that turn 3. For your weaknesses, the biggest one is just hand space. You have so much draw, they just draw too much, but that is just about it. For Ekko, we're putting him up in that A tier. Next up, we have Elder Dragon. Very impressed by his 6-star, made him so much more powerful. For him, very consistently turn 3. You can drop him and just end the game. As far as weaknesses, just your lack of draw. Now, this isn't necessarily that big of an issue, since normally you're only playing like 1 card a turn. But if you have some bad luck, you don't draw your Elder Dragon, don't draw the cards you need, you can then really struggle to try to go through your deck to find them. But overall, very consistent champion. We're putting him up in the A tier as well. Next up, we have Evelyn. For her, very consistently able to end on that turn 3. As far as your weaknesses, it's just enemy removal. So if they can like kill your husks and keep your Evelyn from leveling, that can really slow and shut you down. But you definitely have ways to counter that with like Black Shield, but is still worth mentioning. For Evelyn, we're putting her up in that A+ category. Now we have Fiddlesticks. I think we all know where he's going. He also consistently ends on that turn 3. As far as his weaknesses, doesn't really have any. Weakness for a lot of champions is they're champ reliant. Fiddlesticks, it doesn't even matter. Even if you don't get him, it's not that big of a deal. And just overall, Fiddlesticks pretty much destroys everything. Great removal, great scaling. So for him, he's going up in that S tier, right behind that Ahri. Next up then, we have Gwen. For her, she can pretty consistently end turn 1. However, she is heavily champ reliant. If they're able to shut down you, Evelyn, in that turn 1, they are greatly screwing you over. You're going to have a much more difficult time. But as long as that doesn't happen, consistently able to end turn 1. For her, we're putting her up in that A+ category, but closer to the bottom. Next up then, we have Heimerdinger. He can consistently end turn 3. Now, if you're a Heimerdinger player, you're probably thinking that's crazy. He can normally end turn 1. And yes, that's the case throughout the course of the adventure. But again, we're just looking more at the start of the adventure with like your base power. And for there, you're very consistently ending on that 3rd turn. As far as your weaknesses, you are very champ reliant. Heimerdinger is your main way of being able to generate all of your turrets. So if you're not able to draw him and get him on the board right away, he definitely can struggle. For Heimerdinger, we're putting him in that kind of bottom of A+ category. Next up, we have Jace. Pretty similar to everyone else, he can consistently end on that 3rd turn. But for Jace, you do have some bigger weaknesses. For one, he is pretty champ reliant, and then spell and unit reliant. This means a couple different things. For one, the spell reliance, you really want to get some good spells from shops because he gets that Elixir of Skill, so it goes off twice. So similar to some other champions like Vex or Jinx, you really want to be getting some good spells from those shops or after battle rewards, and so that can be a little bit more inconsistent. But then also, you really rely on having units on the board that get buffed up when you play your 6-cost spells. So you need a good balance of both, and that's just opening up areas that can bring in some inconsistencies, like if you don't draw any units, you don't draw any spells, or if the enemy's able to take out your units, then you are going to lose a good amount of power. Still, though, he is quite strong. We're putting him in that A category right around Ekko. Next up, then, we have Jhin. As far as him, he's able to end turn 2 to 3, incredibly strong. His weakness is you need your champion. Now, for this one, you normally can still do okay without your Jhin, but he is giving you your massive amount of power, so you do really want to be getting him. For Jhin, we're putting him in that B+ category. Now, I think this is one that personally I wanted to rank a little bit higher, but I think that this is one that chat voted on to have him a little bit lower, which I was a bit surprised by. Next, then, we have Jinx. And for her, she's normally ending turn 3, which probably seems a little crazy to some people, but in those higher end adventures, Jinx just doesn't have enough damage anymore to end in the first turn like she used to. So she's pretty consistently ending turn 3. Biggest weakness is you are generally very champ reliant. You need your Jinx to hit the board, generate those super mega death rockets for you. Also, you are spell reliant, similar to like the Jace or Vex that we mentioned. You get a huge boost in power when you're able to get the right spells from shops or after battle rewards, since they have that extra damage on them and that can really help your scaling. But if you have bad luck finding those, it's going to hurt your power. For Jinx, we're putting her in that A+ category. Kind of crazy not having her in the S tier, but it is what it is. Moving on, then we have Kaisa. For her, pretty consistently ending on turn 3. Now, she does good damage every turn, but you really need that second attack to generally be able to end. And I believe that's normally when you can also drop your Kaisa, which gives you just a massive spike in power. As far as your weaknesses, the enemy just having massive units turn 1. Again, that's like 15 to 20 stats in the very first turn, which some of the nightmares can do by just dropping their biggest units turn 1 with some modifiers. So that is a bigger weakness for you, but overall Kaisa very strong. For her, we're putting her in that A+ category. Next up, then, we have Kale. For Kale, she's normally ending on turn 3 or 5, normally not turn 4, because for Kale, she actually needs to have her units attack. As far as her weaknesses, you are unit focused. Now, there is a little bit of an asterisk there. For Kale, normally her units are a lot stronger than most other units because they have massive stats when you drop them. Also, when you drop them, they're normally doing a lot of board-wide damage to the enemy. So while you still need to rely on your units in order to get the damage down, her units are a lot stronger than many others that are also unit reliant or unit focused. So it is still a bit of a weakness, but for her, it's not as big of a deal as many other champions. For Kale, we're putting her in that A category. Next up, we have Leona. Now, for her, she is on the slower side. She is normally ending on that turn 5. As far as weaknesses, you are champ reliant, and again, a little bit of an asterisk there. While you definitely want your Leona, and she does give you a good amount of power, good amount of control, she's not as bad as many other champions that really just need their champion. If they don't draw them, they're normally going to struggle to end. For Leona, you have good enough base units that they can still be fine. So champ reliant, but not as extreme as many others. And then also you have card gen. Similar to Elder Dragon, you're normally only playing like one card around, so it's not as bad as many champions. But still, if you don't draw the right cards, you can quickly just be running out of options. For Leona, we're putting her actually in that A+ category. Again, I think this is one that chat rated a little bit higher than me, but we're going with it. Next up, we have Lilia, actually incredibly strong. For her, she's normally able to end between turn 2 to 3 because she can do free attacks even in her off turn with her 6-star. Now, for weaknesses, she is a bit champ reliant, similar to Leona. Lilia is able to give you a good amount of power, really helping you end in that turn 2 to 3 time frame. But if you don't get her, you still are pretty powerful, and so you will be able to end. It's just going to slow you down. So a bit champ reliant, but not as bad as many other champions. For her ranking, we're actually putting her in that A+ category. She is quite good. Next up, then, we have Lux, another relatively new champion. For her, pretty much able to end turn 2 to 3. Again, since she can generate some rallies, she can potentially end in turns where she doesn't start with the attack token. For her, the biggest weaknesses is drawing only units. So if you don't draw any spells, that really shuts you down. And this does actually happen. But again, that's just luck of the draw, which is very based on card games. And then she's also another champion that is champ reliant with that little bit of an asterisk. You want to be able to get Lux on the board. She gets you a lot of power. With her, you can get that Chemtech duplicator going. But she has enough of a decent build that even if you don't play Lux, you're normally still going to be able to end. It's not like your entire strategy falls apart without her. For Lux, we're putting her in that B+ category right there next to Jhin. Then we have Lux Illuminated. For her, able to end often turn 1 or turn 3. Again, you need that attack token. As far as your biggest and weaknesses, again, champ reliant for her is more champ reliant than most other units. You really do want to get your Lux Illuminated on the board, which is giving you a lot of extra power. For Lux Illuminated, putting her in the A+ category just because she can put so much pressure on early. Although again, I think this is one that chat put her a little bit higher than I would have put myself. Moving on though, we have Misfortune with speed turn 1 to 3. Again, you have enough damage when the enemy attacks you with your spells that sometimes you can actually end even when it's not your attack turn. As far as weaknesses, I don't really think she has any. Like, sure, you could say that she's slightly champ reliant, but she can still do more than enough damage even without the champion. She has extra draw baked into her kit. I just think overall she's a well-balanced and very strong champion. So for her, she's going up in that S tier. Next up then we have Morgana. Morgana with the 6-star does get a lot faster, so she can consistently end around turn 3. As far as weaknesses, you are very champ reliant. You need to get your Morgana on the board early and need to generate a lot of her champion spell to be able to get those invokes for some more spell or card generation. Now, while you are very champ reliant, you're normally running like Echoing Spirit, so you shouldn't have a problem drawing her, but it is something to note. For her, she's going up in that S tier. Next up, we have Nasis. For his speed, it's turn 3 or turn 5 as well. And then his biggest weaknesses is just very dependent on getting kills. For Nasis, you don't really have any way to kind of cheat around getting kills. Like for Volibear, you have other ways to summon Sigils of the Storm. You don't just rely on kills, but for Nasis, you have to get kills. And so if the enemy has like massive units or they just don't have any units at all, it can really shut you down. And then also you can struggle with getting enough draw with your Nasis, especially since he has a lot of cost reduction. A big issue with people that have cost reduction is just running out of things to play. And so that is something Nasis can also struggle with. So for Nasis, we're actually ending up putting him down in that B+ category. Moving on then, we have Nautilus. For Nautilus, again, you're normally ending in at turn 3 to turn 5. You need that attack token to be able to end. You don't really have enough damage without the attack token. As far as weaknesses, it's just being a bit inconsistent. With Nautilus, you're adding a lot more cards to your deck, so it's very easy to just not draw the cards you need. With Nautilus, while he is pretty strong, it's kind of similar to that Aurelian Soul, where that inconsistency is just whether you're going to end turn 3 or turn 5. You're normally going to be strong enough to end regardless, though. For Nautilus, we're actually putting him down in that B category. Next, then, we have Nico. For Nico, it's normally turn 3 or 5. Again, you need that attack token. As far as weaknesses, you actually have a good amount. So it's very easy to run out of cards, because with Nico, you have that cost reduction built in from your 3-star. So it's easy to play things for cheap, but then just running out of things to play. And then if the enemy has large enemy units, again, like 15 to 20 as far as stats, it can really shut you down, because with Nico for your 6-star, you actually need to attack with as many units as you can. So if the enemy has big enough units just to block you, then you can get shut down really hard. For Nico, she's actually champion we're putting down in the C tier. Often people talk about champions and call them good or bad, and I think all champions, especially at 6-star, are good, except for Nico. She's the one champion that I would actually say is bad. I hope she can get slightly adjusted and buffed up, but I don't really think she's in the good spot, and she's, down in that C tier. Moving on, then, we have Nora, and Nora's one we actually used to rate lower before we actually were able to get her 6-star. She's actually very, very good with her 6-star, massive spike in power. So for her, she's consistently ending on that 3rd turn. As far as weaknesses, she is champ reliant, but again, she's actually one where you're normally going to be running with Echoing Spirit, and so you are really mitigating that. For her, she's going up in that A tier. Next up, we have Pike. For him, often then between turn 3 and 5, you do have a lot of free attacks, so you can potentially end in turns if you don't start with the attack token. As far as weaknesses, you are champ reliant again, but with that bit of an asterisk where Pike is giving you a large amount of power, but your base units are strong enough that even if you don't draw him, you can still end consistently. And then also just that little bit of being inconsistent, similar to like Aurelian Soul or Nautilus, where it's kind of just determining how fast you're going to be able to end. And while the lurk mechanic can have some amount of inconsistency with it, normally by the time you use 6-star, that is greatly diminished. So still a little bit of inconsistency, but not that big of a deal, but still worth mentioning. For Pike, we're putting him in that B+ category. I think this is one that I actually would probably put a little bit higher. I really like Pike, but I think chat voted to have him lower. Next up then, we have Samira. Samira is a lot of fun, but actually can struggle in some of the very high-end nightmares. So for her, she's normally ending turn 2 to turn 5. She can generate rallies, so she can still end on turns which doesn't start with the attack token, but pretty wide as far as consistency there. Again, this was a starting adventure. We didn't get any other extra powers. As far as weaknesses, very large units. This is kind of the biggest thing that shuts you down in these nightmares, where you can't actually attack with your Samira or your other units. And again, these large units is like units that are like 15 or higher stat lines, where your units just can't attack, they're going to die. And so that really shuts you down and reduces your win speed. And then also, you are champ reliant, you really do want to get your Samira. Without her, your power drops significantly. For Samira, we're putting her up in that A category. Moving on then, we have Sett, one of the new champions or champions that recently got updated. For him, you're normally ending turn 2 to 3. Little bit of luck based on when you get your chem tech online, but he's able to generate multiple rallies. For his biggest weakness, it is being champ reliant. You need to get your Sett. Now your 6-star definitely helps that quite a bit, since you're able to generate your Sett from that. So somewhat your biggest weakness is getting solved by your 6-star, which is quite nice, but he is pretty ridiculously strong. Once he gets on the board with chem tech, which can happen like turn 2, it's pretty much over. So for Sett, we're actually putting him in the bottom of S tier. Next up, we have Swain. I think we all know where he's going, but he can normally end turn 2 to 3. As far as your weaknesses, you are champ reliant, again, similar to many other champions. If you don't draw your Swain, you can still be fine, you will win, but having Swain dramatically does increase your power. Now for Swain, he's going up there in that S tier, one of the best champions in the game. Next up, we have Talia. Now for Talia, normally ending on turn 3 or 5, you don't really have any damage outside of your attack windows. As far as weaknesses, you actually have a decent amount. So you have like no removal outside of your units attacking and the enemy blocking. And then if the enemy just has large units, again, that like 15 or higher turn 1, that really shuts you down, because Talia's whole kind of gimmick is having bigger units the enemy and just rushing them down. But if the enemy can just straight up block you, then you're kind of screwed. Also, you just have, in general, limited tools. So you don't really have removal. You don't really have a lot of way to protect your units. You're very straightforward. You just need to attack with your units. If the enemy can throw pretty much any wrench in your plans, it's really going to hurt you. So for Talia, she's going down in that B+ category. Next up, we have Tritameir. For him, able to end between turn 3 and 5. Again, he can generate some rallies. So for him, can actually end in those off turns. As far as his weaknesses, can be a bit inconsistent, especially his whole gimmick of trying to bring a champion out of your deck with the spell he generates. A lot of inconsistencies in that. Now you can try to mitigate that, but in general just have some inconsistencies. And also he has some pretty weak removal, again, outside of his units, or if you throw like a Stalker Blade on your Tritameir, don't really have a lot of removal. For Tritameir, he's also going down in that B category. Next up then we have Twisted Fate, again, one of the new champions. He's able to consistently end turn 3. He gets just a massive power spike. Normally at that point, he is leveled and absolutely dominating. As far as his weaknesses, he is, again, champ reliant, but normally you're going to be running Echoing on him, so you should be able to draw him. And then removal is actually enemy removal. If they're able to take out your Twisted Fate, that is going to be pretty rough. Granted, you should have some extras so you can play him right away again, but not having your Twisted Fate on the board is very bad for you. For him, though, we're actually putting him again at the very bottom of that S tier. Next up, we have Vayne. For her, she can consistently end turn 1. She's one of the best turn 1 champions in the game, very similar to Gwen, but also very similar to Gwen, very champ reliant. If you don't draw your Vayne, or if the enemy is able to like recall, kill, do anything like that to her turn 1, you are going to be way weaker, and you're actually going to struggle to end. So very strong, but also massive weakness that the enemy can exploit. For her, she's going in that B+ category. I think I probably would have put her a little bit higher. I think there's another one where chat brought her a little bit further down. As far as Vex now, turn 3 to 5, you have a lot of damage you can do regardless of attacking, but with that, that kind of brings in your biggest weakness of not getting good spells, because she gets a massive amount of power when you get spells from like shops or after battle rewards. And then also just there not being enough enemies to kill. A lot of your damage comes from your 4-star, your explosive finale, but if the enemy doesn't have units for you to kill, that really is going to slow you down. For Vex, we're putting her up in that A category. Next up then, we have Vi. Vi with her 6-star is actually really good. I know a lot of people dislike her, but I think she's actually a very good champion. For her, you can very consistently end turn 3, because that's when you drop your Vi. As far as weaknesses, very champ reliant. Similar to Ashe, you need Vi in your opening hand. You need to have her turn 1 so she can start scaling up. If you don't have that, then you're going to have a much worse time. But as long as you have Vi in your opening hand, you will pretty much destroy. For her, she's going in that bottom of A+ category. Next up, we have Viego. For him, he can consistently end between turns 1 and turn 3. Really just depends on the luck of the draw for Viego. As far as weaknesses, you can struggle with card generation, either draw or just having cards to play. You can try to mitigate this with some relic builds, such as like Portal Pals or Symphony, but it is still an issue you can have. You do have that slight inconsistency with him as well, because even if you are going for those card generation relics, they might not give you the right cards, and so the amount of power you can have can really fluctuate match to match. And then you are champ reliant, again with that little bit of an asterisk where Viego is giving you a large amount of power. That being said, Viego baseline is so ridiculously powerful that even if you don't draw your champion, you're still going to be able to end, just you're not going to be able to end like turn 1 without having your Viego. For Viego, putting him up in that S tier, a little bit lower than he has been previously, just because some of the weaknesses he does have, but overall still a completely busted champion. Next up, we have Victor. For him, you're normally ending turn 2 to 3, and I know a lot of people are going to be kind of shocked knowing like, oh, Victor, you can consistently end turn 1. It's like, yes, except not at the start of these hardest adventures. Again, that's what we're factoring in. Every champion can end turn 1 once they get lucky enough, but for Victor, in those tougher adventures, you're normally not ending turn 1 at the very start. As far as your weaknesses, again, got that champ reliance. Now, normally you're running like echoing on him, so you're very, very likely to draw him and have him in hand, which is mitigating your biggest weakness, but it is still a weakness for the champion. For him, he's going up there in that S tier. Next up then, we have Volibear, one of my favorite champions. For his speed, you're pretty consistently ending turn 3, but it can get pushed back to turn 5. As far as your weakness, again, pretty consistent, but massive units turn 1. If the enemy can drop like 15 or higher units, that can really shut you down. Volibear is all about having bigger units than the enemy, and if the enemy just has units that are too big, you can really struggle. Also, weakness is nothing to kill, similar to Nasis. Now, Volibear has other ways to generate sigils, but the amount of power you have is going to vary greatly when the enemy has a bunch of small units you can just kill easily, or if the enemy just doesn't have any units or just has very massive units, it is going to slow down your Volibear. For him, he's going up in that A category though. Next up, we have Warwick. For him, he can pretty consistently end between turn 3 and 5, gets that scaling going. As far as weaknesses, card generation can be a bit of a problem. He has a lot of very cheap cards, so it's easy to burn through them all and then kind of run out of things to play. You really need to try to pick up extra card draw or just card generation in general. And then also champ reliant. Again, you're normally running echoing though. That really helps fix that. Then even if you don't have Warwick, your powers are good enough that you can still generally end even if you don't draw him. But it is worth mentioning, for Warwick, he's going up in that A category. Next up then, we have Yasuo. For him, it's actually a little rough. He normally ends around turn 5, which is a lot slower than most champions. He has great control, great removal, but you normally are just not getting enough power to end really quickly. As far as your weaknesses, if the enemy is able to remove your units, that can be really rough, especially since your units are normally slowly getting stronger, especially your Yasuo. So just taking the units off the board, even if it's just like an enemy recall, is kind of just wiping your unit as far as stats, which is really slowing you down and can hurt you quite a lot. Then you also are very champ reliant. You really need your Yasuo. He's where a lot of your damage and removal can come from. That being said, with Yasuo, you do also want to run echoing most of the time, which does help mitigate that. For Yasuo, we're putting him up in that A+ category. Last up then, we have Yuumi. For Yuumi, pretty consistently ending turn 3. And again, this is against the toughest nightmares. She can be a turn 1 champion, but against the harder nightmares at the start of the adventure, normally it's still turn 3. As far as weaknesses, the enemy having a lot of hard removal. I mean, with Yuumi, she doesn't have great hard removal either, but if the enemy is able to remove your units, it can be quite difficult. Now with Yuumi, you're able to give your units barrier, make them scale up quite a bit, so it really has to be hard removal of like a recall, an obliterate, a kill spell, something that having stats doesn't really protect from, or having barrier doesn't protect from. So that is one of your biggest weaknesses. And then also just having draw to make sure you get the right cards can be a little bit of a weakness, although Yuumi does have pretty good card generation, so not as bad as many other champions that we say struggle with draw or card generation, but worth noting. For Yuumi though, we're putting her up in that A+ category. Overall, pretty solid. So that is it for this tier list. Again, we're rating all the champions at their 6 stars with their best build in mind. And if you want to know more of the reasoning on why we actually put the champions where we did, I highly recommend checking out the video I'll link down below, which shows you the stream we did with chat ranking all the champions, including all when we were doing the polling with chat to see where the general consensus was on a specific champion. I hope you enjoyed the video though, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.